Hi everybody, thank you. Happy Monday, and thank you so many times for being here with me. I'm Tressa. Everybody calls me Terry, and today is a really important vlog for me because I'm going to be introducing myself. I have already put up a initial vlog which happened on or about 2017 when I very first started my YouTube channel, but I've been wanting to do a new introduction. It's been and is very important to me because I would like for everybody to know the real me, and all of my vlogs, videos have been the real me. But when I say know the real me, to reintroduce my past, my history, my goods and my bads, and everything about me, because I would like people to understand where I'm coming from, my reasons, why I do the things that I do, why I've done the things that I've done, who I've become as a result, which I believe is a really good, great person. I do feel that I need to still make improvements, a lot of improvements. I'm still on my journey, and my journey continues. I have quite a history. There's a lot that's gone on with me, and I want to put it out there. I have put it out there, um, which is how I started my channel. I am first, foremost, first, middle, last, a most passionate and serious animal advocate. Animals are my first love and my be all end all love. I love animals the most. Puba, my gorgeous red-nosed pit bull, inspired everything good. I dedicate everything because of Puba, um, the most perfect being, to animals, to the betterment and good of the treatment of animals. My dearest goal is to have a non-profit for animals someday, and I hope that it's sooner. And I work on it every day. I want to thank each and every one of you for following me. Even one follower to me is such a big deal, because every one new follower, every view, every interaction, every presence that I have on social media, which I'm hoping to develop and refine, and it has evolved quite a bit, but I want to bring about a very much bigger evolution, goes towards my goal of a nonprofit, or hopefully nonprofits for animals. I would like to write law and change existing laws and make huge changes for the betterment of animals. Tougher laws, tougher punishments for those who dare abuse animals. See, human beings are fallible. Animals, however, have nothing negative about them. That's how I feel, and that's actually a fact. Animals are unconditional. They are unconditional. They don't just love unconditionally. They don't just give unconditionally. They are unconditional, everything about them. They are the best souls. They can never have a bad intention. Humans, on the other hand, do have bad intentions. bad thoughts, bad actions that they commit. Animals are not that way. Even if they bite, it's out of fear. It's out of defending um, someone they love. And at any rate, I just want to say that everything that I'm doing is going towards my most passionate and dearest ever goal for animals. So, a little or a lot about me, my past, my history, and where I am now. I was born in New York to two Persian parents, my mother and father. My father was um, very dysfunctional. He was able and he was successful, but he was dysfunctional in that he had a personality disorder, and it never gave him an excuse, and it never gives anybody with certain personality disorders um, of, you know, being a sociopath, psychopath, narcissistically so. Never gives them any excuse because they always know what they're doing. My father was a controlling sociopath. My mother is um, a an underhanded sociopath. My father passed away, so that's why I said was. Um, they were hypocrites, as are my relatives, um, my family. They are all hypocrites. They lie, they deceive, they hurt people, and I was brought up in a very dysfunctional um, atmosphere. I was actually raised by my grandmother, who was not as virulent as the rest of them were. And the reason I was raised mostly by my maternal grandmother is because I had a phobia of being around my mother, because she would abuse me verbally, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and physically. She would beat me. My father would uh, abuse me, never physically, but always psychologically and mentally. And it was a tough childhood. And anybody who's been through this knows that, you know, it's a generational curse. And if you're not one of them, then you're living in their world. And it does, not just it can, but it does affect you in so many ways. And I have just in the last few years come to realize that there are names and terms and definitions for what my parents and relatives and family were. To make it clear, I am not blaming anybody for my own wrongful actions. I was an adult when I started, I was a legal adult when I started getting arrested for stealing and committing such crimes, using credit cards um, that did not belong to me, that I had stolen, to buy things. Um, I grew up as a child of parents who had the means to buy me necessities and things that I wanted, but chose not to. Not because they didn't want to spoil me, not because they wanted me to work hard to earn things, because when you're born, when you're 4, when you're 5, when you're 6, you don't need to be taught or have it beat into you the value of a dollar. So their motives were never, um, you know, good motives. Their motives were to deprive me and to hurt me in order to make themselves feel better. And they did that in such a variety of malevolent and cruel ways. And depriving me was one of them. Consequently, I grew up always feeling deprived, always feeling insecure because I never had enough food even. So I never had enough clothes, I never had enough shoes, even for school. And those are things that I had to, as a child, as a very, very young child, as young as 5 years old, I had to find ways to acquire those things, even school supplies, snacks, things that other children had as a matter of um, routine. Um, I grew up around children who had um, normal, I guess, relatively normal, and really good parents. I, of course, was not privy to their very personal, in depth lives, but the children that I grew up with, the schools that I went to, um, they didn't have, for the most part, drug addicted parents, alcoholic parents, um, dysfunctional parents. And that's another thing. My parents have never had any addictions to substances, so they never really had that excuse to be the bad people that they were. So me repeating and driving home the way that they were is not to excuse the crimes of stealing that I committed, the crimes, period, that I committed, and my arrest history. Those are on me, and I take responsibility for those. And there have been a few times that I was arrested when I was absolutely innocent of what I was charged with. Um, so that has happened to me as well. But for the most part, I've always been guilty. Um, and that's what happened. I have been in county jails, in state prisons in Los Angeles and California. I have also been um, for cases, well, once, but out of that once arose about 2 times to Patton State Hospital for the purposes of the court cases that I had. In court cases, it was one court case but 2 charges that arose while I was sentenced to prison, when I had to defend myself and I stabbed an inmate to save myself. I did do that. I did it with intention. I did it deliberately. And, if I had to defend myself again, forbid that I'd ever be in that position, but if I ever had to defend myself again, I most definitely would, in whatever position that I'm in, because we have a right to defend ourselves and save our lives. With that said, um, I've had a lot of adversities in my life, of course, because as a result of being raised by 2 narcissistic sociopaths and extremely, extremely cruel ones, um, as a result of being mistreated, abused, beaten, deprived, being cussed out by my mother on a daily basis. It was, in fact, something that she enjoyed doing, was cursing and cussing me. Not just cussing, but also cursing me. And I remember that when I was a child, when I was a preteen, when I was a teen, when I was an adolescent, I used to urge her and beg her, oh, please, please stop, cursing and cussing me. It just destroys me. And she would do it more, because that's the kind of person she was. She liked and likes to provoke people. She's underhanded and she's sneaky and she's malevolent. She would also provoke my father. They would physically fight in front of me until I developed a phobia of being around them, because seeing them hurt each other hurt me. And so I would mostly um, live with my maternal grandmother. They were selfish. They would fight in front of me. And how most of those physical fights started was that my mother, she would intentionally provoke my father to hit her. And my father would hit her. And they had no problem fighting in front of me. Because what was important to them was not me. It was important for them to outdo each other. And it was terrifying as a child. It was terrifying to sit and stand there and watch them. There were so many times that I would open the front door and run out blindly to the first neighbor that I could find, by just the first door that I could find to knock on and beg to be let in. Um, it was a scary childhood. And I'm still not at the point, because I'm still a work in progress. Absolutely, I am. I'm still not at the point in my life where I can talk about these things and not be angry about it. I'm working on myself, but it's really, really hard. I have experienced physical abuse by my two uncles, my mother's brothers. Um, my father never hit me. He had other ways to abuse me, with his hypocrisy, with his words, with his subtle but definitely always deliberate barbs, um, to strip away any confidence and to cause me to grow up with actually no confidence. And as a result, I became an empath, and I attracted other narcissistic sociopaths into my life. There was a time when, as a result of one of my arrests, yes, one of my many arrests, I was in a rehab facility. This happened when a I would say relatively he was a good judge, because he did give me a chance. This was Judge Fox, um, when Beverly Hills Court conducted criminal cases. He gave me a chance. He let me be released from jail to go to a rehab in Pasadena, and that will be a future vlog when I will talk about my experiences in Pasadena Recovery Center in Pasadena, California. When I went there, and somebody there um, told me something, and it always stuck with me, and I will also bring that up. But at the time that I was there, my father was alive, and he would come once in a while with his wife to see me. My mother would come more often than he did to see me in the rehab before I started earning day passes and then overnight passes. And I remember one of those times that my mother came, and it was a session with one of the counselors, Shirley Bennett. This is how underhanded my mother is, and how underhanded these personality types are. And if you know, then you know. She actually sat there in the office with this counselor, who could sometimes be very nice and sometimes be an absolute jackass. And we were having a so-called, you know, family session, if you will. And my mother managed to turn that session into it being all about her, by telling this counselor how she was a victim of me. Instead of talking about how she had allowed her boyfriend, when I was about 11 to 12 years old and a virgin and didn't know what a kiss is, or a kiss was, to molest and rape me by forcing me to be at his house alone with him on a regular, consistent basis every week. It was 4 days a week, after I told her that I didn't want to go there. She always blamed me for this. She said, "Oh no, you stole my boyfriend, so it's your fault." When I was 11 to 12 years old and didn't know what a kiss was, yeah, I was a virgin and I didn't even know what a kiss was, she falsely accused me of having stolen and seduced her then 35-year-old pedophile boyfriend. And he was a pedophile because um, a couple years later after that, he told me himself that after we moved from Oregon, where this happened, and moved to California because my parents had been separated at the time and they got back together, subsequently, her boyfriend found another single mother with a daughter my age, and the mother was his girlfriend. And he said that the little girl, on his suggestion, would come to his house sometimes after school. So this was a pattern for him. He knew what he was doing. He knew the type of women to target. When he targeted my mother, um, and he was very wealthy, and my mother felt like she could throw me as the sacrificial lamb so that she didn't have to do much for him. She knew he was a pedophile. My mother is very intelligent. She's very shrewd. She knew what she was doing. She could sacrifice me and still reap the benefits of his wealth, because that's how he distributed and shared his wealth with women. So that's what she did, and that's how I came to be molested and brutally raped at the age of about 11 to 12 by a 35-year-old man who is a pedophile. And to this day, as far as I know, he's never been brought to justice. At the time when that happened to me in Portland, Oregon, it was pretty devastating. But you have to consider that I was the little girl of a toxic mother, and that's another reason why he succeeded in doing what he did while keeping me quiet, silenced, because there's trauma bonding. And so I felt like even after he did what he did, I felt like I loved him. He convinced me to, to feel that way. He manipulated me, and that's a hallmark of these types of people. They're manipulators, and I was manipulated by him. I felt that I loved him. I felt that he was the friend to me that my mother would never be. And why did I feel that way? Because he told me. Right before he molested and raped me, he made a comment one day when I was at his house alone with him after school. He said that, your mother is buddies with your little brother and she hates you, but don't worry, I'll be a buddy to you. And at that time, and at that very point, I thought about it, and I thought, it's true, she is buddies with him and she does hate me, which was actually a fact. And he used that to his favor and my detriment. At the time that this happened, I could not tell my mother. In Portland, Oregon, in the house was myself, my mother, my younger brother, my grandmother, grandfather on my mother's side, and my uncle Sina, Sina, razban-nia. My mother's name is Violet razban-nia. I couldn't tell them. I was so devastated, and I didn't know how to tell them what had happened to me. But more importantly than that was that I knew with all my being that they would not do anything to help me, because they were more interested in helping themselves. And in the Persian community at the time, that was such a taboo thing, to have been raped, to have been molested, raped again and again. And what would that do to their reputation? So their reputation was far more important than I ever was to them. But here's the thing, they knew about it all along. My entire family, my relatives and my family knew what had happened, what was going on, and they chose to allow it to keep going on. I'll tell you this, here's some more evidence supporting that, but that's not all. Just giving you one instance. when my parents decided to get back together, and on the eve of us driving back to California from Portland, Oregon, I thought I loved this guy. I won't even call him a man, and I didn't want to move. I felt scared. So I had called him that night, and we were talking on the phone, and I remember telling him how scared I was, and keep in mind, he couldn't afford to ever let this get out either. He actually sometimes would convince me off and on that, yeah, well, if you tell anybody, you're going to go to jail. Yeah, that was a lie, but he sometimes had me convinced of that. At any rate, the night that I spoke to him on the phone, I told him how scared I was and everything. He said, okay, well, meet me at the bus stop, and the bus stop meaning where I used to wait for the bus every day to pick me up, the school bus to take me to school, all the children to school. So, I thought I had been on the phone secretly. I had plugged in the phone jack, and then unplugged it and put it away back under the bed. Um, and I left the house crying quietly, and I left and I went up the steps, because outside behind the house there were steps that led up to it was a shortcut that all of us kids took to get to the bus stop every morning. So it was in the evening. I went up those steps to meet him, and he never showed up. He never planned on showing up. However, my uncle did. He showed up and he picked me up. Years later, because for some years I had to actually deny what had happened even to myself, because it hurt so much, the molestation and the rape. And years later, when I did come to terms with it, it really blew up inside of me, and it was ripping me apart. And I know one day when I finally sat down and told my mother about it, um, and she was never the type of woman that would sit down to listen to what her daughter, her child, had to say when it was hurting her so much. But I begged her, please, please, what, just please, I need to talk to you. And she, unwillingly and grudgingly sat down in my room across from me while I sat on the bed, and she sat in the chair. And I told her what happened. She said, yeah, well, I knew that all along. Well, you stole my boyfriend. What did you expect? And she stormed out of the room. And that was when I was about 16 years old. Um, my father knew about it all along too, because one night when I was about 17 and this was still just ripping me apart, and I was at his apartment um, in LA on Doheny, and one night I was just crying to him, and telling him about it. He said, well, I knew it all along anyways. I mean, the day I knew about that boyfriend of hers, and I had seen him one time when I came to visit you guys in Portland, I always told myself, one day that's going to be Terry's boyfriend. And that was the first time that I knew that he knew all along. So there was no refuge for me. And my life continued with dysfunctional family. Um, when I was younger, when I was about 5 through the age of, I would say, about 10, my uncles, my mother's brothers, anytime they felt that I got out of line, when I would jump up and down for a donut, because I was so excited when they would buy a dozen and bring it home. They were only for the adults, but if I jumped up and down in joy or excitement and wanted one, I would get um, punched in the mouth to put me back in line. Yeah, so I would get punched, I would get slapped, and it didn't matter if there were people around. Um, you know, I would still get punched and slapped, and I always felt like I was at fault. You know, I never had any guidance. I never had anybody kind in my life to tell me, this is not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong. You're just a child. I always felt ashamed. Um, I felt like a bad person. Like, what is it about me that would cause me to get beat? Um, what is it about me that would cause me to be deprived of necessities, let alone the things that I wanted? What is it about me that would cause me to be treated so vastly different than other children? Um, I was always told my parents that I was a bad person. I was no good. I was never satisfied. I mean, you have such good parents and nothing is ever enough for you. You're just never satisfied, are you? It's never enough for you, is it? No, you can't have this. No, you can't have that. You don't need it. You already have so much. These were blatant lies, but they would plant a seed in my mind. Well, maybe I am a bad person. Um, you know, maybe something is wrong with me. What's so wrong with me? And I grew up like this. I grew up timid at times. I grew up with a chip on my shoulder at other times. I grew up angry, sad, depressed. I grew up with all of the symptoms and dysfunctions of a child who is brought up in this way. And to this day, my mother causes trouble, not just for me, but for a lot of people. See, they always wanted to have this good reputation in the community, but they actually always had a bad reputation. They were hypocrites. Um, my father, for example, he always told me, "Well, you're such a criminal. Um, you always want me to get you out of trouble, but you're such a criminal. Nothing ever helps you." Although my father had stolen a lot, many different instances. In fact, one of those instances, he had been involved in, at the time, a very well known, and when I say well, not good, but um, widely known theft ring in downtown Los Angeles. He had been involved in it, and everybody in the ring actually got arrested, and he was in jail for a while, and he was fortunate enough to, I guess, they worked something out where he would go to some type of furlough facility. And so, he eventually worked himself out of the sentence, and whatever the supervision terms were. And he always bragged about, well, the thing about me is, well, even though I got arrested, well, I mean, the court believed in me. They gave me this and that. Courts never believe in anybody. Court and trials, and even not always trials, but cases are about, you know not always about guilt and innocence, but who tells the best story, or who has an attorney who's willing to work hard for them to get them a good deal. He was one of the men in the ring who had an attorney who was able to get him a better deal, and that's what he got. Um, he never once expressed any remorse for any of his crimes, and he was a bad person. He manipulated lots of people. And I believe that people didn't like him for him, but they went along with him and enabled him because of the benefits that they could reap as a result of just going along with and enabling him. That's how it was with my father, and I regret to this day that I never got a chance to tell him what I really felt about him, and it haunts me to this day. When my father passed away, I was actually in the Los Angeles County Jail under arrest and fighting a court case um, when I was innocent. It was for a charge that I was absolutely in no way guilty of. And that arose from the fact that I was at the time on parole and working for somebody who did not want to pay me. And I made a claims case, a legal case out of it. So she retaliated by, um, it was easy for her at the time because of my circumstances, um, where she had me arrested